Very good morning and welcome to this edition of Inside Politics with me, Fred Indimuli. What a week it has been, and the expectation is even higher today with only hours remaining before the Supreme Court gives its verdict. Now we'll be discussing this and a lot more with my panelists, but before that, even as Kenyans continue to wait for the judgment of the 7-judge bench of the Supreme Court on the presidential election petition, majority of the legal minds have already narrowed down the possible scenarios that the judges will have to rule on. Lawyers say the judges will either uphold the election of Deputy President William Ruto as the country's 5th president or nullify the same and Kenyans go back to the ballot. However, not all lawyers have ruled out the possibility of the judges confirming that the Azimio la Umoja presidential candidate Raila Odinga as a president-elect, given the prayers to retally all the votes cast were not granted by the court. And as our senior political affairs reporter Chris Dairo reports, the judgment is also expected to rule on the role of IEBC chairperson vis-a-vis those of other commissioners.
Odinga and 7 others versus William Ruto and others.
In less than 48 hours, Kenyans will be waiting with bated breath as 3 women and 4 men of the Supreme Court deliver judgment on the country's 3rd presidential petition. Legal minds have narrowed down to 2 scenarios.
There are only 2 options available. They will allow some of the prayers or all of the prayers, or dismiss the petition for lack of a good cause. So there is no middle ground in any suit that has been taken, in any petition that has been filed, or in any matter in court. The court has to make a determination in favor of one or as against the other.
Probably the court doing a retally and thereafter a declaration and order for issue of a certificate to Raila Odinga and Martha Karua. But based on the petition, did not so much, touch on and was not so much pegged on the question of figures. I do not see how that other aspect of the petition would succeed.
In case the judgment favors the petitioners and Ruto's presidential win is nullified, then this only means that the current President Uhuru Kenyatta continues to remain in power for another 60 days until fresh elections are conducted and winner declared. Uhuru at this time will still have limited powers.
A fresh election, then it will have to be conducted within 60 days from 5th of September, when the judgment will be delivered. And within that time frame, Uhuru Kenyatta is the president. I mean, he will only have limited powers.
And if you look at Article 134, Article 1, it says that that period of temporal incumbency is from the day of the first vote to the day of a new president taking over.
Given the limited powers that the president still has since its transitional period, the main petitioners, that is Azimio presidential candidate Raila Odinga and his running mate Martha Karua, will have to return to the ballot with the same IEBC commissioners. For any removal of a commissioner, a tribunal must be set up to probe him.
If it does not participate in the electoral process, if there's a fresh election, then whoever participates will be declared the winner, whichever the number of votes the person got. Remember, we have had a similar situation in 2017 when the court ordered a rerun, but Raila Odinga decided that he's not going to participate in those elections. And remember, then there was no dispute, because whoever gets to participate and gets voted for will be the only candidate on the ballot, and that is it.
Here, like things we have heard you say today, we consider ourselves equal. None of us has a veto power.
The judges will also come out clearly and give direction regarding a split in the IEBC, given that majority of them have disowned the result announced by IEBC Chairman Wafula Chebukati.
To what extent does the majoritarian rule apply within the running of the commission? I think those are some of the questions that were raised and which therefore the Supreme Court really need to delve on.
In the meantime, both parties continue to cross their fingers that the much-awaited judgment will favor their side. Chris Dairo, KTN News, Nairobi. Give me a moment.
It is definitely the biggest talking point at this point in time for every Kenyan. And even on our dailies this morning, the Sunday Standard is talking about the supreme options. Now, tomorrow, CJ Come's bench will give either a unanimous judgment with concurring verdicts or majority decision with dissenting opinions. And the Sunday Standard goes on to give some of the options for Supreme Court judges. 1, uphold Ruto win. 2, nullify election. 3, censure Chebukati. And 4, verdict on IEBC. On the Sunday Nation, on tenterhooks. Yes, cautious optimism as the country awaits tomorrow's judgment, and it talks about Raila's options and Ruto's choices. There's a lot to discuss and a lot of the stories inside these dailies with regard to the presidential election petition. Allow me to introduce my panelists this morning. Political risk analyst Dismas Bokua is with us. Good morning, Dismas. Karibu sana.
Good morning.
Communication strategist Rita Oyer. Karibu.
Asante.
And lawyer, political strategist Ishmael Nyaribo. Karibu sana. Good morning. And yes, I decided to have the same panel I had last Sunday because you have some questions to answer with regard to your prediction of what happened on Monday. But before that, let's talk about what the big story of the day. And this is about the expected Supreme Court verdict on the presidential election petition. Let's start off with, well, it's laid out on the dailies this morning. But what else do you expect apart from what is here on the dailies?
Well, that's a very good question. So I hear Azimio side say the biggest issue is the qualitative issue, and I hear Ruto's side say the biggest issue is the integrity of Mora's vote. And based on the 4 days we have been following these cases, it seems no one can really say Mora doesn't know where the vote was, because from the ballot, and this was even evidenced by the scrutiny that happened, Mora can trace their vote from the polling station, the tallying at the polling station, the display at the polling station, the constituency tally, national tally, announcement. No one has demonstrated that anything was deducted, anything was added, or anything was moved from one candidate to the other. And for me, that is what an election is. Now, the qualitative issue that is being mentioned, again, it has not been demonstrated that whatever those issues were, it interfered in any way with this Mora's vote. Mm-hmm. So for me, the question, if I usually say as a country, we are so familiar with analogical reasoning and deductions and conjecture. But if we go to the structure of what an election is, the basic structure of what an election is, the voice of the people, that we the people that everyone talks about, Mora seems, from everything that we have had, to be able to trace her vote to the announcement. Mm-hmm. So again, as much as there's issues, I have been the one, really hammering IEBC on their organizational issues. But the question for me then is Supreme Court supposed to help us as a country run IEBC? Are we making a judgment at this point on IEBC as an organization or on a presidential vote? So I think that is what it boils down for me.
Are you saying you have serious questions on IEBC's ability to run an election? Because, as you say, everything else, and opinions are varied.
Yes.
You go to social media, everyone has a different opinion about how it will go. But when it comes to the IEBC,
yes,
you seem to have a question mark there.
My question, and for me, following this Supreme Court hearing was very interesting because it seems all operations that IEBC undertook in these elections was simply to answer the 2017 questions. Like they worked backwards. So if we go to a petition, what are the issues? Now let us make sure those issues, we are ready for it. So then, what they failed to do is to manage the organization and the people in the organization, which is the softer issues and sometimes bordering even on legal issues of how the organization is supposed to run. But in terms of conducting the elections, and I am so now conscious that they did this deliberately, looking at all Supreme Court ruling in 2017, everything Raila asked for in 2017, everything that got them caught in 2017 and worked backwards so that all those things are fixed, which is a very functional and technical issue. Yes. But the management and the legal side, there might be a question there. However, I am very clear now that whatever those questions were, they did not impact even the dissenting. I mean, what moderation? Mora can't. They seemingly did not impact Mora's vote.
We'll leave that to the court to decide in a matter of hours. But talking about the 2017 election and the petition that came immediately after that, and the court eventually went on to give a judgment, and they said there were irregularities and illegalities. Now, one of our very ardent followers, and that's Tom Wolf, asks this question: if at all there were illegalities, how come we've not seen over the last 5 years someone made to answer for those illegalities? If at all there were illegalities committed by the IEBC back in 2017, and this was a pronouncement by the court, 5 years later, we're looking and asking questions about the same commission, yet no one took the same commission to task to actually make them answer those questions.
Well, you know, then the person who was responsible, the DPP then, is now Minister for Environment. So he's only supposed to be answering those questions during his term. And the current law enforcement officers, the criminal justice system, because for the Supreme Court, for them, it's only to make their opinion known that there were illegalities and there were irregularities. So they do not go the extra mile to start the prosecution. And you remember last time they said that for you to have a free, fair, and predictable presidential election, it must be held in strict adherence to, number one, the Constitution, the laws, and all regulations. And then they spoke about those illegalities and irregularities. And as been demonstrated, the last few days, it's very clear that Mora's will was not frustrated. That Mora woke up one day in the morning and went and cast the ballot, and the will has been reflected at the National Tallying Center. So there's nobody who has come and said, wait a minute, this is what Wanjiku wanted, and then in the middle of the airwaves, our view has been
But I thought
suppressed.
that was the whole point of Azimio's petition, that the will of the voter is not what reflected at the end. Are you saying that, what exactly are you saying?
No, what I'm saying is that the presidential elections are held at the polling station. That is why you have that now famous Form 34A. Now, it's the same 34A which found itself from all these 46,229 polling stations. It came as it is to Uchaguzi Center at Bomas of Kenya, and after doing the tallying, Mora's will was reflected as announced by Mr. Chebukati. The petitioners did not demonstrate that Form 34B has been contaminated, adulterated, or compromised to an extent that Mora's will has been frustrated. You remember during the prior election, there was an issue that, would you please open this server so that we can establish what did Mora intend? And for some reason, maybe in their wisdom or lack of it, they said they cannot open the server because the guys who are maintaining it, or the fellas in charge of it in France, we were in a different time zones, they were asleep, and when they wake up in Kenya, we are asleep. So for some reason, they failed to open it. And I think that was the bone of contention. And again, as has been indicated in this conversation, there are two aspects, the qualitative and quantitative. Now, the quantitative is about the absolute numbers. How many votes did Raila get in a particular polling station? How many votes did Ruto get in a particular polling station? When you add who meets the threshold, 50% plus one, who gets a majority in the county. So the numbers are very clear. Now, when you talk about the qualitative aspects, in my view, and having spoken to many lawyers, including Ishmailia, you have to demonstrate that the processes were also compromised in a manner that Mora was not able to express her will. That maybe before the elections, there was a voter suppression, and you have to demonstrate that the voter suppression is within IBC province. That's the reason why they say that the rescheduling of elections in Kakamega and Mombasa may have affected it. But you see, outside that, and again, they failed to demonstrate because the fellas from IBC came up with those numbers, which was very interesting. But outside that, if you allow me to make some general observations, going to the Supreme Court, in my view, is a very good thing because the entire world now has been glued to Kenya, and everybody was saying, wait a minute, is Kenya in fact a third world country? What is happening in Nairobi? Our neighbors, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, were glued in Kenya. And then number two, contrary to what happened during the last election, this time round, IBC decided to run with their own talent. They got in some bright young lawyers, and like last time when they retained some older lawyers who did not even go through the court documents. They were caught, they were not sufficiently prepared. So it's interesting that that happened. So in my view, whatever is happening at the Supreme Court is good for Kenya, because there could be something, I don't know whether it's the case, judicial tourism. People may be coming from all over the world to come and see how does Kenya manage this, because and finally it has brought investor confidence, because now people want to come and do business in Kenya know for a fact that the Supreme Court is very strong, that even the two most powerful politicians, when they want to complain, they can actually use their judiciary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bwana Nyaribo, of course, listening to Rita and Dismas, they sound almost certain about how the Supreme Court will
likely to decide.
Will lean.
Fred, I am disbarred.
Do you agree with them?
I am not allowed, by virtue of the fact that I'm a member of law society, to even hint how the Chief Justice and the 7 learned Supreme Court judges will or might rule. But and if you note that there were Justice Tande allowed us to discuss these things, that's how we were discussing. But you remember also the Chief Justice citing Supreme Court rules and said that she would still, the Supreme Court could easily cite people for contempt. But nonetheless, because this question has been asked, I will avoid making any prediction. I think the Supreme Court scored highly during the whole process, because they came out with a human face. They really resonated with the public, with the lawyers, cracking jokes occasionally, asking relevant questions that everybody wanted to hear. I think on that account, like Dismas has said, they've put the country at a very high rate. I'm sure when we read the social media, you can see people from all over the world commending the great job being done by the Supreme Court and Kenya in general. So the Supreme Court has done very well. Listening to their questions, the ones they were asking the lawyers for clarifications, I don't know the conclusions the judges will have. But they asked lawyers several questions. If you noted, they were really keen on... In fact, this petition was not so much about the law, really. If you look at it, it was facts. What happened? Figures. What happened to the figures? So, like, there was a question, why would you not wait until tomorrow? I mean, it was answered. Whether it was effective, again, I will leave that to the judges. There was a question, why didn't you, end of the day, after the cooling down of temperatures, why didn't you then announce the 27 constituencies? Why didn't you? There was an answer to that. Whether the judges were satisfied, again, we will see that in their judgment tomorrow. So, if you say that Mora, Wanjiko, Akinyi have sufficiently been represented, that they can trace their votes, how do you say then that the Akinyi, Mora, Wanjiko in the 29 constituencies also can follow their votes, you see? So my point is, we will just comment to a certain level. We will want to see how judges address their minds to those various questions that they actually put across to the lawyers.
Okay, and probably because I agree with you. It makes no sense going too much into predicting what the judges will say. We can manage to wait for at least 24 hours or so for that. But what possibly was your highlight for the coming from this 1 week? Because yes, we wait for 5 years to have such a process after every election. What was your highlight this time around?
Well, I think that judges have, like I said, have become very friendly. But besides that, they are keen on ensuring that what Kenyans expect is given to them by the particular institution that has been mandated to do that. And it was clear to everybody that IBC will be required to do more, whether that will be brought out by the judges, but IBC will be required to do more. If you have 7 commissioners and then you have a 3rd person, apart from the 7 commissioners, you have an 8th person in the commission. And when you are asked about who is this, you say, this is not significant. I mean, he's a person we've just brought in to sit with us, and yet the law does not, require him to sit there with you. So these are some of the issues. I think there will be quite a bit of finding in terms of what IBC can do and what IBC cannot do.
Yes.
But there was also an interesting observation. You saw how lawyers actually, like this man said, they were so prepared. My good friend Willis Otieno, you saw what he did. So wait to, I mean, you could see. But you must also appreciate, and I think this is to be fair to lawyers, a case can be bad, Fred, and you may be the one handling the bad case. If you look at Professor Githu Muigai, when he started the whole representation, initially, really, he gave good address, but did not go deep into it. Apart from later, when now the judges were asking questions, then he's trying to answer. If the case is so bad, like you're saying that if you are 7 commissioners and you're the chairman, it's all about your conscience. Judges finally actually demonstrated that no, as we work as a team, we will not have one person dictating anybody. So what am I saying? It does not demonstrate that Professor Githu Muigai was in any manner, not understanding his case. But sometimes, as a lawyer, you are given a bad case. And if you are given a bad case, what will you do? You simply really go around it and try to find whether there is law or there is a precedent or there is... I mean, you just go around it. But, but that, to me, that particular point, in terms of what can the chairman do and what can the other commissioners do, that was a bad case for the...
Yes, and allow me to give, I'll give you each a minute to talk about, even without having the verdict, and once we get the verdict, we'll come and discuss that. But before that, because this process serves so many purposes, so many different purposes beyond the verdict that will be rendered tomorrow, do you feel that we got some direction, because this process also helps the country to understand better our electoral process? Do you think we got a bit of that?
I was actually hoping for that question of what was my highlight, but I was sorry.
You can ask yourself and answer the question.
Okay, so maybe in part, yes, the country always, and I really love Kenyans for this, they're always in a learning mood. They engage even with high-level types of scenarios like Supreme Court and the law, and you can see the interest. You can see Kenyans doing their own research and giving their own opinion, which is very good. We have been having this type of discussion with my good friend Mwalimu Wandia Njoya, and there's of course a concern that taking an election, and I saw even someone, Ndula, did a cartoon about it, that it cannot be that Kenyans vote and then judges decide who the president is. And we had this discussion, are Kenyans being alienated because someone feels they're not too smart, they're not too intellectual, they're not lawyers, for example, and you can see some of this discussion on social media, someone actually trying to shut you down and tell you, keep quiet, you're not a lawyer, let the lawyers. But as a citizen and as a voter, it is very interesting, and we should continue to encourage people to participate at the level. It cannot be that once we vote, then the case is in the Supreme Court, then it's only lawyers and IT people who can discuss it, and then the rest of us, 22 million voters, or the 14 million that showed up, are alienated from the conversation. So yes, Kenyans, I like that Kenyans are aggressive. You cannot shut them down. They'll keep engaging, they'll keep learning, and they'll keep participating. Can I now answer about my highlight?
Yes, in about 30 seconds.
You see the way we say an election is a process for IEBC? For me, the biggest learning is an election is a process, even for political parties. And it was very interesting for me to see that there's the petitioner, some of his team don't even understand the electoral materials that were on the ground, and they failed. If we say a presidential election ends at the polling station, and then that is the place where you slack, for whatever reason, then it makes me understand that maybe this gospel that we preach, that an election is a process, is only to IEBC, but the parties have not understood. So for me, this is a big revelation, that parties should actually engage, even with IEBC, and real engagement, not going to Greece and touring saying Form 32.2 is fine, because it was them who said it's okay for it to be printed. When they come locally, they're the first ones to send in a letter to say, no, we don't want it. So it's the theory that an election, or the principle that an election is a process, should actually be taken seriously with and by our political parties and anyone who works in that system. Again, as someone who's in communication and branding, and I know that is what usually steals the show, the communication and the branding, but a campaign is actually way deeper, especially a presidential campaign. You have to really be intimate with every single aspect of the campaign material, the pre-election conferences, and engaging with IEBC.
We only have 60 seconds for you, Dismas.
Those are sufficient for me. Now, what I learned from this process is that actually going to the to the Supreme Court in Kenya is going to become a best practice. That whatever happens, people will still go to the Supreme Court.
It is part of the process.
Yeah, for validation purposes and also for healing purposes. Now, for me, in my view, the highlight was several young lawyers. This young lawyer called Mahat Somoine did very well. Then there was Umar Sombati and Paul Mwangi as well as Otienda Molo. They did very well. Now, these other gentlemen called, the one you referred to, Willis and Pinky Ponky, I don't know what the intention was, but the other lawyers, I think they did very well.
But he is one of those that Kenyans will definitely remember.
Yeah, and also there was the gentleman of Kusadikika. Yeah, but I think the idea that IBC has given young lawyers the opportunity to shine, and also Professor Githu Muigai as well as Mr. Ngatia, letting the young lawyers run the show, and for them they come on as team leaders, I think that's very solid mentorship.
Okay. Well, time for us to take our first break. When we come back, we'll be discussing more about the balance of power in the National Assembly, plus the predictions that Rita and Dismas made about the elections that happened on Monday and what the final outcome was. That after the break.